My name is Cosplay, and today we'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Shugo Chara by making Amu Hinamori's Arcana Academy uniform from the all-new sequel, Shugo Chara Jewel Joker. Time to unlock our hearts! For Amu's skirt, we're going to be following McCall's M7022 in the view of A. Fabric-wise, we'll be using this plaid cotton that I found at Joann during one of their liquidation sales. After cutting the skirt pieces as well as pressing them, we're going to pin our front and side skirt pieces together and get ready for stitching. Side note, something I like to do whenever I'm working on a pleated skirt is mark with my pins where the pleat lines will be as well as which way the pleat will be going. Once the front and side pieces are together, give your new seams a good pressing. Once our pleats have been pinned into place, we're going to baste down each one and then baste across the skirt. After the pleats have been basted, give them a good pressing. Now we're going to repeat what we just did for our back pieces. Now, it's time to stitch our front and back pieces together. As always, don't forget to press your new seams. Now stitch your center back seam from here to here. Now we're going to move on to the yoke of the skirt. For the yoke, we're going to cut 2 sets of the front pieces and the back pieces. Keep in mind that one yoke set will need to be interfaced. Once everything has been pressed and interfaced, we're going to pin our yoke front and back pieces together and get to stitching. With right sides together, pin the yoke to the skirt and baste it into place. Follow it up by stitching it into place. With the yoke attached to the skirt, it's time to install the zipper. To install our zipper, the first thing we're going to do is baste our ends together to create more seam allowance. Once that's done, take the zipper, open it, and pin it into place face down. Once you finish basting your zipper, turn your skirt to the outside and begin stitching the zipper down into place. Once that's finished, we can start removing our basting. Now we're going to stitch our yoke facing together. Once more, press your new seams good. Then pin your yoke facing to the yoke and get to stitching. For an extra clean finish on the garment, we're going to slip stitch the yoke facing into place. Once the slip stitching saga is over, we're going to add 8 buttons to the front of the skirt. I'll be using these buttons that I found in storage that are apparently from 25 years ago. Now to add our trim, cut 2 strips of bias tape to your desired length, then fold each strip in half and stitch it down. Pin your trim into place and get to stitching. Last but not least, hem your skirt. Voila! Amu's skirt is done. Now we're going to move on to the armband and tie. To make the pattern for Amu's armband, I'm going to be using my old Haruhi Suzumiya armband from back in the day. For the armband, I'm using some cotton I had in my stash from when I made Sailor Moon many years ago. I think this fabric came from Hancock Fabrics. Give your rectangles a good pressing. Now we're going to interface one of the rectangles. With right sides together, Pin the rectangles together and get ready for stitching. Remember to leave one end open so we can turn this right side out. Take your pinking shears and clip your excess fabric. Turn your armband right side out and give it a good pressing. Now stitch your open end closed. Be sure to stitch as close to your edges as possible. Now stitch both ends of the armband together. Yay, we have an armband! Now for the tie! Since I didn't have much plaid fabric, I decided to make a clip-on tie. For the tie and knot pieces, we're cutting one out of each of our plaid, interfacing, and red cotton. First, we're going to interface the tie and knot. With right sides together, pin the knot pieces together as well as the tie pieces and get to stitching. Don't forget to clip your excess fabric. Now we're going to turn our knot and tie right side out and give them a good pressing. Hand stitch the knot and tie together. I made my knot a little too big, so I'm folding the edges on the left and right side and tacking them into place to help it look more natural. Finally, hand stitch the clip to the center of the knot. Now that Amu's tie is done, we're going to move on to her iconic leg warmers. For the leg warmers, I ended up making my own pattern. After a few alterations and 2 mock-ups, I got to cutting out my plaid fabric. Once the fabric was cut and pressed, I got to hemming the top and bottom of the leg warmers so that they won't fray. Next, we're going to cut out our trim. I took my remaining bias tape and cut it in the center. Once it was cut, I hemmed the bias tape strips. Using a ruler, pin the bias tape 4 inches from the top of the fabric, then stitch the trim into place. After that, take one of your rectangles and pin the ends together at the raw edges, bringing the right sides together and get to stitching. Give your new seam a good pressing. Now it's time to cut some elastic. Cut 4 pieces, 2 long strips for the top of the leg warmers and 2 short strips for the bottom of the leg warmers. To make the casing for the elastic, fold 1 inch of fabric and pin it into place. While stitching, be sure to leave a small opening. With that finished, it's time to thread the elastic through our casing. Hook the top of your elastic strip to a safety pin and begin threading it through the casing. Bring the ends of the elastic together and stitch them. Stitch the casing opening closed and repeat what we just did for the bottom of the leg warmers. With the leg warmers done, it's time to move on to the bolero. For the bolero, we'll be using some black cotton and loosely following Simplicity 8462. The main modification we're making is making the front of the bolero straight instead of curved. Once the fabric pieces have been cut out and pressed, we're going to make our darts. Whenever I'm working with a dark colored fabric that needs some darts, I'll use some white tailor's chalk. With the back of the bolero marked, pin your darts into place and get to stitching. Now we're going to repeat what we just did for the front bolero pieces. After giving the darts a good pressing, we're going to move on to adding our facing. Interface the front panels of the bolero as seen on screen. With right sides together, pin the bolero front and back side pieces together and get to stitching. Give your new seams a good pressing. With right sides together, pin the front and back shoulder seams together and sew them into place. Now repeat all the steps from before, minus the interfacing, and sew your lining layer. Now we're going to take a pause and work on the sailor collar. Using a pattern I drafted, I'm going to cut 2 pieces out of the black cotton as well as interface one side. With right sides together, Pin the sailor collar pieces together and get to stitching. Turn your sailor collar right side out and give it a good pressing. Stitch the opening to the sailor collar closed. Stitch the sailor collar to the fashion layer of the bolero. Now with right sides together, stitch the fashion and lining layers of the bolero together. Remember to leave enough space to turn the bolero right side out. Now we're going to add our bias tape to the sailor collar. Since the bias tape I had on hand was a bit too wide, I decided to cut it in half at the center. Pin the bias tape to the fashion layer of the sailor collar and stitch it into place. Afterwards, slip stitch the remaining side of the bias tape for a clean finish. Now we're going to press and top stitch what remains of the bolero for a clean finish. Time for the last part, the sleeves. Once we've marked our darts, stitch them into place. As always, give your new darts a good pressing. Make your gathering stitches. I like to do this twice just in case. With right sides together, pin your sleeves together and stitch them into place. Hem the ends of your sleeves. Remember to do this twice. Finally, pin your sleeves to the armholes of the bolero and stitch them into place. Take your time and don't rush so your sleeves won't pucker. With the bolero complete, Amu's Arcana Academy uniform is done. Because I have to make at least one aspect of a costume sparkly, I decided to bead Amu's classic hair clip. I didn't record much footage of working on it, but it's beaded the same way as the earrings and hair clips from my super idol Hanon cosplay. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments. Next time we'll be making something a little bit different from start to finish. Thanks for watching, and remember to always believe in love. Bye!